Bruce.
Okay, folks, we are at the top of the hour, a little past. I think we'll have other folks joining us as we move along. I want to just go over a couple of quick housekeeping things so everybody can find their way around this space. You have two ways to view. You have a speaker view and a gallery view. If you want to get a look at who's in the room, go ahead and click on the gallery view. You'll see a little arrow to the right will let you scroll through, so not everybody's going to appear on a single screen. So if you're looking for friends, go to gallery view, click on through, and you'll get to see all the folks that are here. Next, we've been engaging before we started, so some of you have turned your mics on. I'd like you to just take this minute right now. If you look at the bottom left corner of your screen, there's a mute and unmute. Everybody that's not Bruce, Diane, Tom, and Susan, you can go ahead and just hit that mute button. And that brings me to a couple of ways that we'll engage tonight. You can type a question in the chat window. To get to that, there's a little chat icon at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, you'll open up a chat window. You can type your question there, and we will pull up some of those questions as we go. And we will have an opportunity probably around 8 o'clock for people to actually ask questions, and at that time you can unmute yourself. Please remember that if you're sharing your video, we can see you. So we've had plenty of folks take us on some wild adventures with their phones and computers, and we've been in bathrooms and bedrooms and all kinds of fantastic places. So please remember that if you're going to do personal things, just take that stop video. You'll see it in the very bottom left, and you can just stop your video, but you will stay engaged. You're here. It won't have you leave the room. So you are at the From Here Forum. It's a Thursday night event hosted by the 6 Feet Photography Project and sponsored by the Click Photography Festival. The 6 Feet Photography Project was designed to help photographers around the globe engage with their daily lives photographically during the pandemic. And a part of what we do to keep photographers inspired is we offer these weekly forums. We have one on Tuesday night and one on Thursday night. Many of you, if you signed up now, are on our mailing list, so we'll keep you posted. But if you haven't visited our website, please do. It's 6feet.photography. And if you're photographing during this time, we'd like to encourage you, if you're on Instagram, to use the hashtag #LifeAt6Feet. We have a large archive that's being both created and will be collected. We're working with archivists around the globe to start to make sense of what to do with the thousands of photographs that we've collected. So we'd like to encourage you to participate. And we're so excited to have Bruce and Diane back for part 2. Bruce and Diane have been creatively collaborating for nearly 50 years. Together, they have co-authored 4 books and produced 6 documentary films. They are both SUNY Distinguished Professors at University at Buffalo and have impacted the lives of thousands of students. In addition to their photography, film, and writing projects, they have hosted community film screenings, annual community salons, which are cleverly disguised as chili events. They have cultivated lifelong relationships through correspondence with many of the prisoners that they met in Texas and Arkansas. And together they have gone beyond the personal to embrace the art of collaboration and community. So one of the topic and what we're going to focus on for this conversation is the role of community in art making. And we're going to talk a lot about my personal fascination with how people collaborate together as beautifully as they have, and the specific ways that they have gone about engaging collaboratively with each other. And so I'm going to start with just a framing question, and then we're going to just get going, and I know y'all have lots to share. I think one of the things that stood out the most for me, Bruce and Diane, in talking to you is the way that community has played a role in your own lives, but specifically your creative process, and how you've applied your own creative genius really to the art of making community. And this intersection of art and life and community, I think, is pretty rare for creative people. And so I'm so excited to see what y'all have created together and to talk a little bit more about the role of art and community in your lives.
Is that a question?
No, it's just a comment. I could make it a question if you want.
Well, this is the sort of thing that I don't think we ever think about until somebody brings it up. So since you brought it up, we've been thinking about it. And for me, our life is kind of seamless. We teach in the same department, in the same university. We live in this big house. We've got these kids. We make movies. We write books. Sometimes one of us is doing something, somebody else is doing the other. But whenever anything is going out of the house, it's almost always shown to the other one, check this, am I smart or am I stupid today? Am I drunk? Should I watch it? I'm terrible on university committees. Diane's great. So often they put her on a committee and not me, but they'll say, did you talk to Bruce about this? If it's something they know we both know about. So in a way, our community has responded to us in the same way. And we have been very much involved over the years in a lot of things in the city in Buffalo. And so the fabric of our lives here extends far beyond the campus. So all of that falls into it, as you'll see in two photographs in particular later that I'll show you. So it's sort of just like looking back, yeah, we did that. Didn't plan to, but we did. And it's been, a great collaboration. I've only collaborated 3 other times in my life with anybody. Once was with my daughter and son. They were having trouble after I got divorced first time. After I got divorced my first marriage. And I said, why don't you talk to your friends about divorce and see how they deal with it. And so they wound up doing a book which I edited called Your Father's Not Coming Home Anymore. And then I found out all these middle-class white kids I know in suburban Amherst, New York, were doing drugs at a time when all the drug news was about minority people. So I asked my son to interview all his friends about that. And we did a book called Doing Drugs. That worked out well. One other book I collaborated on with a friend, he just didn't do anything, so I did it. So Diane's been my real, we have been each other's collaborator in this. And there are things that there's no way in the world the other of us could have done. Like there's no way in the world we could have done our death row work without my years of work in prison. Right. There's no way we could have done our our non-film, without Diane's years in a religious order. So it's really been a bilateral thing.
And he's so prolific. I used to say it's a full-time job just reading his stuff, just editing it, doing it. So yeah, Bob Creeley said to us when we started the film series, he said, you've got this thing here, which is really a community thing. And we'd never thought of that, but indeed it was. It was a small class and then open to the public. And, it's been going for 20 years. We've shown almost 600 films. And
almost 600 different films.
Yeah. Right.
Each week, it's always been in a public theater. It's always been open to the public. It has a core of students that rationalizes it for the university. And a huge portion of our current friends and acquaintances in Buffalo are people we met through that film series.
Yeah.
And some of them are with us tonight. So each week we prepare a handout. It started out as 1 page. Now it's usually 12 to 16 pages. We introduce the film, show it, and then have an open discussion. And it has become, we cannot go shopping in our local market, Wegmans, without somebody coming up and either arguing about that week's film or apologizing for not having missed it. So you know, for teachers, it's just an absolute delight to have it radiate outside the classroom and outside the time of the classroom.
Bruce, this is Tom.
Hi, Tom.
So I was gonna wait and ask a question, and you don't have to answer it. You can wait and answer it. But how did you all meet, and how did you see the overlap in your not work but sensibility and point of view on the world at that time, if it's even possible to go back there?
September 1970, my first day on the job. I was at the sandwich machine. And at the time, the sandwiches were labeled, they had names. And I'm standing there looking at it. I was very nervous because Buffalo was a kind of place of wild men. And I had turned down Berkeley, which seemed like the convent to me.
You mean the Buffalo English Department?
The Buffalo English Department, right, yeah. And, but I was trying to act as though I wasn't nervous, and I was very competent. And I'm looking at the sandwich machine, and this hairy guy comes up next to me, and I don't look at him. But I say to him, "Have you ever eaten an astronaut?" And he just looks at me and says, "Madam." Yeah, that was the beginning. And 3 years later, we got married. And we started right off just, well, first of all, he did the thing they do in all the movies. He mocked me. I had just out of Hopkins and very fancy, you know, structuralist, Frenchy stuff. And I'd written a very fancy graduate proposal for my class about paradise myths. He reads it aloud in the hallway and mocks it. And
I didn't mock it, I just read it.
Yeah, you mocked it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you did. And of course, that sort of attracted me. But we were just very attracted to one another. And a woman in the department had said she'd save me a whole lot of time, but she went through the whole roster with me and gave me everybody's background in the sexual situation. And after I met him at the sandwich machine, I walked into her office and I said, "Who is that?" And she said, "Oh, that's Bruce Jackson. He'd be great for you. He's sexy. He's a Harvard Junior Fellow. He gets everything that he wants. He's really hot shit." I said, "Well, isn't he married?" And she said, "Well, yeah, but he's not going to stay married. He fucks around." I said, you know, and I said, "Oh dear. Well, thank you very much." You know, there had been no divorces in my family on either side since the prehistoric days.
You told that story. Huh?
Which story?
The one you just told.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Well,
continue.
That's how it went. And I haven't had anything to drink either.
I thought there was a good story in there.
Now, Tom, had you heard that before?
I have never heard that.
Well, you know, you're so dear and so familiar. I think you know everything. And when you said last week that you had a lot of questions to ask, I thought, oh, these are going to be the good ones.
But then we talked for a year. I mean, our offices were in the same corridor, and we just talked
all the time.
The whole year.
My office mate was John Coetzee, the Nobel Prize winner, who was the novelist, South African, the most taciturn person who ever lived. And he would never talk at all. So I would go down the hall and talk to Bruce a lot.
That was the only reason.
That was the only reason.
But then I went to California on a Guggenheim. And right after I left, Attica happened.
Yeah.
So Diane was sending me tapes. And in the course of the year, we exchanged about 1,000 pages of correspondence.
Yeah.
And then we came back, moved in together, and here we are.
And wife married her divorce lawyer, which is why the divorce took such a very long time, but it turned out to be a good thing because the kids stayed here.
One of the questions I would want to hear you respond to sometime, but it may be too big a question, in all seriousness, too big a question, but I was thinking today about your backgrounds you know, how you all view. So often when people talk about, you know, the perfect collaboration, or you should meet them, you share this, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see where you came from and where you've been prior to the sandwich machine and
Right.
possible eating of astronauts?
Right.
But
Well, on the face of it, you know, we look very different. He's a
Right.
Jew. I'm a Catholic.
he's an atheist Jew,
Yeah,
comes from an atheist Jewish family.
right. I came from a very religious Catholic family, and I'd been a nun for almost 8 years. Oddly, we really shared primary values. We both worked in prisons. I mean, he had done, you know, primary work, and he got in and was able to do things that a woman never would have been able to do. But when I was in college, I used to go to industry, which was a place for juvenile delinquents. And I got to the worst cottage just because, well, for bizarre reasons. But anyway, so I would be teaching these kids the 10 Commandments, and they would be assuring me not to worry that my car wouldn't be stolen because they were watching out for me and they were caring. But we both had the same, though through very different filters, commitments to social justice and to prison things, and, you know, trying to.
And also a lot of similar interests in literature, music, and art.
Right. Yeah.
And food.
Yeah.
So
maybe we should see the art. I mean, I know you all have got stuff to show, and I don't want to.
Want to show the stuff and then we can talk?
Okay. Well, we prepared 5 things for you this evening. Have a short PowerPoint of photographs that will show you the various stations and what we've been talking about. 2 clips from our death row film. One of the final 6, and those are both short. One's 3 minutes, one's under 5 minutes. A 6-minute, the last 6 minutes of Out of Order, which is our film about nuns. And then a 16-minute short film about the poet Robert Creeley. Now we did a long film about Bob, an hour-long film, but this one is just so much fun, and it almost happened.
Yeah, we were trying out a lens.
We were trying out a lens, yeah. And Bob was into it, and everything just worked. And it's just one of the, if it weren't a film by us, I would say one of my favorite films about a poet, and yeah. it still is. Yeah. So
Whitney thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what we got. So let me show you. Let me do just some pictures first, and we can both talk about it. Yeah. Excuse me. New York Times just popped up. Screen share. There we are. You seeing Diane? Everybody?
Yes.
Are you seeing a picture of Diane?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. This is in the Arkansas Penitentiary. I started going to the Arkansas Penitentiary in August 1971. I went again with my 10-year-old son in August 1972. And then I went 6 more times. Diane was with me on 5 of those trips. Sometimes she took pictures. Sorry. Whoops. And this is the way she dressed in the penitentiary with those pumps. We saw this picture last week. Even the mules are attracted. And I must say, her presence did a lot of good for me with the convicts, because they just like seeing Diane walking around, and she was good to see walking around. Occasionally she shot things other than a camera.
Not often.
Not often. She didn't like the guns. This is a picture of Diane inside the women's prison. The women's prison was a 1-acre compound within a 15,000 acre men's prison. It was a former chicken coop. During the days when Cummins was the worst prison in the United States, the warden used it basically as his own private brothel, and they would send women to him through that gate. This is Diane interviewing somebody in the women's prison in solitary. Solitary there was just a place where somebody was there for a day or two. And this is Diane teaching a poetry class in the women's prison. You want to talk about this?
This is the visiting room. If you saw, what's the movie that?
The Getaway.
The Getaway, isn't it?
Sam Peckinpah's Getaway.
Getaway. This is the visiting room in Ellis Prison in Texas. And when Bruce was on the row, actually shooting the film, I was on this visiting, doing long interviews. Most of the interviews in the book, Death Row, are from the long interviews I did. And though I was in full feminist hope at the time, I wanted to be on the row. It was clear immediately that I couldn't be on the row without being enormously disruptive. The Johns are right in the open, and the Texas guards are absolutely hysterical about women. So Bruce would do short film things on the row. And I would do long interviews with the various. This guy is Billy Hughes, who was a farrier who took care of horses. Horses, yeah.
And a cartoonist.
A very sweet guy. And
we were in correspondence with him until before they executed him.
Yeah. But he and everybody thought he was innocent, actually. Yeah. But we got very different kinds of things, because I would do long interviews and I would say to Bruce, interview this guy on this because he's so good on it. And Bruce would sometimes see a guy on the row and he'd say, go and talk to Diane and talk about this. So it worked out collaboratively, really, wonderfully. Because
we knew when we went down that we wanted to do both a film and a book.
Yeah. Because
you just can't have that many words in the 60-minute film, and there were a lot of words to be said.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to do with this, we knew you're not going to change anybody's mind about capital punishment by arguing capital punishment, but nobody knew about death row. And death row exists nowhere in the law. It's an artifact of the death penalty. It's collateral damage. And so we thought we would show something that was not part of the general discourse.
Right. And there's no other film that does this.
Yeah. And so, but as I said, we wanted both. And that also is another kind of collaboration, is that we were able to think of this in terms of working in two very different media at once. And so anyway, the work we did on the row informed the work each of us was doing on the row.
Yeah.
So at the end of our stay at death row, the last day, they had promised Diane she could go down to the row and say goodbye to everybody she talked to.
And I wanted to thank people.
To thank them. An assistant warden was on that day, not the warden.
Saturday.
As a Saturday. And at the last minute, he said, no, I can't let Ms. Jackson go down there. They always called her Mrs. Jackson, even though we told them again and again that wasn't her name. And I said, why not? He said, oh, it's too dangerous. I said, this is Texas' most locked up prison. It's Saturday. Everybody's in the cell blocks. He says, oh, somebody might say something nasty. I said, she's heard everything. He said, no, I can't. And he did it just to be mean.
Oh, and to punish me.
To punish
being
you.
Nice to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was absolutely a cruel thing. So I go down to the row and I load up the cart with our goods, the camera and everything. And I'm leaving and I turn around and I see from all of the cells on the first tier, a hand holding a mirror out, which is the way you look, and they're all watching, they leave. And I come down the corridor and I'm just crying like a baby because we were emotionally involved with so many of these guys. And I get to the car and I tell Diane, I'm really upset. And she says, "You're upset. You're upset." A little while later, we had dinner with the former director of corrections and Diane, a very straight guy, and it's very straight
Wonderful
wife.
guy, actually.
And Diane said, "There's a warden out there. I want to nail his fucking ass to the wall."
He made me very foul-mouthed.
Yeah.
We have to say that.
Okay, so that was getting out of death row. The picture you're seeing now is, we promised them on the row that we would show the film to them first. And if they thought it was bullshit, we wouldn't show it to anybody else. So we did. This is the film. This is the scene. This guy who was one of the first people I filmed. And it's showing to the guys in their cells through the TV sets. And this is in December 1979. And there's Diane sitting next to the barber chair. This guy closest to the lens was somebody from the State College who helped us. The three men in white suits are trustees, and you see three guards there. And there's Diane looking up. The guy on the left is to the right of Diane. His name is Thomas Andrew Barefoot. He's dead now too. And that's me in the barber chair. And then afterwards, we went around. By then, death row was two sides of a cell block. It was 6 rows. Each of those cell blocks, each side had 3 tiers. And we said hello to everybody.
And thanked them.
And we thanked everybody. And this is Diane with one of the guys. And this is her with another. And this is, they insisted, they never had a guard near me. They weren't allowed to. But they would not let Diane go 3 feet without a guard in attendance. What's going to happen there? Nothing.
Well, actually, should we tell the Brandon
No,
story?
I want to tell the Brandon story later before we show Brandon.
All right.
We got a good story for you. This is working on the film about Bob Creeley in Maine. This is Diane with Allen Ginsberg. I'd known Allen since Howie Becker is on this call tonight, an old sociologist friend. I met Allen at the same event I met Howie in spring 1969 in Buffalo. Allen was one of the most interesting people I ever knew because you could not see him for 3 years and he would pick up a conversation where it dropped off. He had a running conversation with you about Blake that went on for 15 years.
Long.
And he would just, every time he saw Diane, he would pick up the Blake conversation where it last was. And this is me, a bit plumper than I am now while shooting them. This is Diane with Bob Creeley in Maine. I don't know if Penn, is that in Maine or that's in Maine?
Yeah,
that's in Maine. That's in Maine. I got a note from Bob's wife, Penn. She's there today where we filmed that. This is in Boston working on the film. This is in the kitchen in Maine, a picture taken by our daughter Jessica. Not everything works out. This is with our friend William Kunstler, a civil rights lawyer. Bill was lawyer for Martin Luther King, Lenny Bruce, Chicago 7, Wounded Knee Indians, and for many
one of the Chicago, one of the
and one of the Central Park Five,
Central
Park 5, and he and Margie are perhaps one of our 2 closest friends for decades. And so we decided to do a film about Bill because his trajectory through American civil rights is just a great story about America in those years. So we were with him on several occasions and we filmed some. That's Bill and Margie. And the grant got approved at National Endowment for the Humanities.
Which had funded Out of Order.
Which funded our Nun film, Out of Order.
And Creeley.
Yeah, that's right. They funded those. It got approved by the panel and got approved by the staff.
Unanimously, yeah.
And then it got to Lynn Cheney.
Yeah.
wife of the former vice president, who had just become head of NEH. And it was stricken.
Yeah.
It was just cut out.
The Republicans really cared about movies. They didn't care about libraries. They didn't care about intellectual things, but they cared about movies.
They cared about movies. And also, I had been writing for The Nation and for the New York Times at the time.
Right.
And I was on their shit list. And,
Yeah.
and
Rightly so.
the staff was distraught. I mean, because they
were
thought
very unhappy.
This is billed at a housing project in the Bronx, an area called Fort Apache, where the owner of the building had promised these people that if they rehabilitated the building, they would turn it over to him. They did. And they turned it into a beautiful building. We roamed the interior. And a few days before they were supposed to get title, he sold it to someone else who immediately told them they had to be out in 2 days. Bill managed to block that, and eventually they got their building. And this was a party celebrating it, and we filmed that. This was a short film we did. We were walking on Fisherman's Wharf, not far from where Howie is right now. And our dog got involved with a fishing boat on which there were 6 or 7 dogs. They was just yelling at each other. And it turned out this guy on the left, William August May, lived on the boat with his dogs. And we chatted with him and we really liked him. So we got some money and we came back to make a movie of him. And you can see the shoes Diane is wearing. 2 days before, we'd been in the Mojave Desert and she'd been wearing shoes like that. I'm surprised that you didn't kill yourself.
I had a gift.
So actually, Howie Becker's house is in this shot. Yeah. Oh, this is Diane when she was a nun.
Yeah. The day I got the habit.
As it were.
As it were.
I have almost no stills of doing the Out of Order film because
You were doing the camera.
I was doing the camera and I didn't have time to do both. But at the end, we brought all of the women who were in it to our house. We filmed a conversation, and this was a still. You'll see the one sitting to the left of Diane, Angela Fina. Actually, you'll see all of these women in the clip we'll show you in a little while.
I don't think we see B.
You're right, we won't see one of them. We mentioned before the film series, this is the theater in which we currently do it. You're wearing the same thing you're wearing tonight?
I am, yeah. Branding.
This is the poster we make every year. We get up with microphones and do basically a dog and pony show. Lately, it's been overflowing, so they put in a video camera and they show it in the second theater, and then they come over and join us for the post-screening documentation. We mentioned the chili party. The chili party, we talked before about the various parts of this world we are involved in. They all come to the chili party. It's people from the university. The age group at the chili party ranged from infants at the breast to people in wheelchairs, people from the university, from town, our friends in the arts community. People would come from hundreds of miles to it. And it usually wound up the last couple times with well over 300 people each time. We made 300 pounds of chili the last few years, 3 different kinds of chili. Everybody brought something else. And this is out in our backyard and what it looked like.
The cardinal and the canary.
The university had a virtual graduation the other day, and they said, will you two take part? And English department, get dressed up. So we did, we got dressed up. And it turned out we were the only people who got dressed up. And I quite like the picture. I don't know what to do with it, but there it is. The hat I'm wearing is in honor of a friend of mine named Joey Giambra, who often wore that, who died 10 days ago of COVID. We've done some books that Susan mentioned before. The first was this one, Get the Money and Shoot. This is when we were making documentary films, and people kept asking us, how do you get those grants? so we'd send them letters.
You were so generous.
And so
Really?
the letters got longer and longer. And then we started, we didn't have,
We
Xeroxing,
parts of it,
Xeroxing. And it got longer and longer. And finally, one day we said, fuck it, let's just really write it out. And so we wrote it out. And this book was about 140 pages. And our film production company printed it. We figured, I think we got 100 or 200 copies. They sold out immediately.
Yeah.
It went through 3 editions and about 8 reprints. Because as new generations of documentary filmmakers came along over about a 15-year period, it was the only thing around.
And the technology changed, but the business of being smart enough to get a grant didn't.
That didn't.
And part of it was, read the instructions.
How do you get a grant? Do what they tell you to do. Basic stuff. This is our death row book, which went through just that one edition in the U.S. Never went into paperback. It was published in France, however, and it's had 3 separate editions in France. It's still in print. It came out in the US in 1980, in France a year or 2 later. Mitterrand used it and our death row film as part of his campaign against the death penalty in France.
So wonderful.
And so our film aired. And it's one of the reasons I was made a Chevalier in the French Order of Arts and Letters.
Right.
Now, they made the guy a Chevalier, but not the girl.
Well, you had a deeper, tranche.
Nonetheless.
Yeah. But Michel Foucault invited us to his salle in the Collège de France, and we showed the film and answered questions.
And this is a more recent one, which several people on this call were involved in, published by University of North Carolina Press. And basically, it was an update and expansion of what we did on death row. When we did our death row work, it was in an interregnum period when people weren't being executed. They were about to start. This is a few years ago, after a lot of executions had started. And the title comes from a poem one of the guys on death row did.
And also in that, we put the film, so that you would have both.
Oh yeah, we put a DVD of the film in it, so anybody who bought it had it. That was great. That's one of the things you can do nowadays.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. The technology is wonderful. We've been together 50 years, and through much of the time, Diane has fought me photographing her. I could do a whole book of photographs like this, but fortunately, I have a lot of photographs like that. So a year ago, I did that. And that is the end of that. We're back.
Bruce, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
And so many of those photographs, Diane has a camera. I'm so curious about how different or similar your individual images might be from that time. Diane, do you have those photographs?
Yes, but I'm how to say it? I have the negatives, and I have Polaroid gave us free. What was the SX70 film, and we used that a lot when we went there. We would take pictures of them and give them to them, and then take some itself. But I just never did much. I mean,
well, and I didn't. I mean, I'm the one who did the darkroom work, and I'm the one who now works on negatives. And I should have recently. We've had somebody doing scans of old unscanned negatives, and some of those have been scanned. And we may go take, because you took a number in the women's prison.
Oh, I've got one, wonderful pictures of them. I mean, there was one woman in the women's prison who had a hair lip, and the woman who was the superintendent, what was her name? Helen Carruthers, wonderful woman. Clinton brought her to Department of Justice in his administration. She took a picture of her. I took a picture of her under a tree so that the leaves kind of masked the hair lip. Helen had her have the operation that made her normal looking, and her life completely turned around. She killed somebody with her lover. He got her to do it so that she would be guilty too. And Helen took the attitude toward the women that they had to kind of spruce up a bit. They had to dress for dinner, for example, and for meals. And she got them much more self-respect and really turned that prison around. The women's prison, when we were there in the 70s, was terrible. I mean, not only was the men's unconstitutional, but the women had a much more dangerous, I would say, profile. It was such an awful place that most juries wouldn't send the women there, especially if they looked good or were mothers. They wouldn't send them there unless they were really bad. They had to have killed their children or something. And so it was a very tough prison.
And it was instructive in this regard. In the men's prison, for meals, all they had were spoons. In the women's prison, they had silverware.
Yeah, knives and forks.
Knives, forks, and spoons. The women wore civilian clothes. Yeah. So Diane said they dress for dinner. You go in there and it's like you're in a normal place.
They couldn't wear hair curlers. That made a huge difference.
So treating them like normal people,
yeah.
they behaved like normal people.
Right.
And it was...
the other weird thing was when I walked into, they had kind of communal sleeping quarters. And when I walked into the first one, it was just like where I had lived as a postulant in a communal sleeping quarter of a convent. And I was thinking, and I never really did it, but the sense of that absolute place, I understood what it was like to live there. And I think it helped me also to be friendly and able to work with them.
Diane, this is Tom.
Yeah.
I was about to go in that direction. I would love to see those photographs. I mean, I don't care whether you think they're any good or not. I just like to see them. Whether they're SX70s or, 35, it would just be so interesting to see what you saw in that moment, and selfishly for me. And I think
I'll get on it, Tom.
I need him to do it. Yeah. Some of them, I also had a theory. There's a line in Ecclesiastes that says, this is the worst of all things, that men die. This is why men are crazy and madness is in their minds, because their only future is to die. So I was interviewing this one woman, Ruby, who was really a psychotic killer and had gotten a number of people. And I said to her, Ruby, what do you think about that? I mean, do you think that part of the reason you're able to kill is because you're thinking about death? Oh, I think about death all the time, she said. But you have your time. When it's your time, you're going to die. She said, I wanted to kill this one guy, and I put a 45 up to his head, and he lived.
She put it up and shot. She shot him.
Yeah, she shot him, and he lived. And this other guy just wanted to cut him up a little because I was mad, and he lay down and died. So I said, so you think it's Providence that decides? And he sort of said, yeah. But she, and she took my poetry course, and she was really good and very smart. We were sitting one time in the library, and I suddenly noticed that in the drawer, there was a scissors. Now, there should not have been a scissors there. She saw me see the scissors, and she no doubt thought about, she's very smart, what I was thinking. And she said, I could just grab that scissors and kill you. And I said, well, of course you could, but you wouldn't do that, and I would trust you to protect me on anybody else. She said, yeah, I would. But I quickly reported the scissors and got him out of there.
Oddly enough, we both had a similar experience. Our old friend Fred Wiseman, his first film was Titicut Follies, about the Massachusetts State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. And about the time Fred was making it, I visited that place, and I was going through one room, and a guy came over to me and asked me for a cigar. I smoked cigars then, and I said, no, I only had one cigar. And he says, You see that? And he points to a table, and there's an axe on the table. He said, do you know what one of these nuts could do to you with that axe? And I said, just what you said. I said, nothing, because you wouldn't let him. And he said, that's right. And he walked away.
But if you were teaching students, you would never, you would tell them they had to be more careful. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm with Tom. I am so curious and fascinated, and I have a feeling that you may have the only person who has images that intimate inside of a women's prison of that kind. And I would let me know if there's any way I can support that process. I just would be so excited to see them.
Oh, I think the process has just been started.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to, what now? You want to see some death row?
Sure.
Okay. This first one is a scene in the rec room. It occurs fairly early in the film. There's no talking in it. Now, we edited the film here. I edited the film. We didn't know anything about editing film. A guy was going to do it for us on spec. I rented a Steenbeck, went down to Maryland to pick it up, installed it in our front room. And as soon as it was there, he said, I can't do it on spec. I have to be paid. Well, we didn't have any money because we literally maxed out our credit cards making the film, because nobody's getting money to do a film about capital punishment is, you can get easier getting money to make a film about daffodils. I mean, daffodils all over the place, death row, no way. So, so I said to him, okay, goodbye. It was good having known you. And I got a book out of the library on how to edit film.
Unfortunately, you're a genius.
And so we edited. So this is one of the scenes. Now, this film showed, one of the first places it showed was the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Now, I mentioned last week, I learned about art as a kid in the Museum of Modern Art. I learned about movies in the Museum of Modern Art when I was 11, 12, 13. I went to MoMA every weekend, every Saturday. It was free for kids, got me out of Brooklyn. And it was, I had favorite pictures. Guernica was still there. I'd visit Guernica. I'd visit the photographs, Brancusi's Lunar Asparagus, and a whole bunch of things I still remember. So having the film show at MoMA was for me like, I don't know, having your mother say, I approve of what you did. However, while it's showing, I hear a line I had never heard while editing it. The hundreds of times we've gone through it
so many times.
And you'll hear it as the cell door is closing. Now, this had been broadcast on television by this point.
Right.
As the cell door is closing, you will hear somebody say, you can suck my cock.
My dick.
My dick. My dick.
Yeah.
Neither of us had ever heard it before.
Yeah.
The sound system at MoMA was so good.
So good. Yeah.
You know, we both were sitting there in the theater. We go, what else is in here? But anyway, this shows a number of parts of it. So, and there's one part at the end of the domino section where a guy is laying down 3 tiles, and every time we see it, we just love his body movement.
Yeah.
It's just so graceful and beautiful. Okay, where are we? There we are. Okay.
You ready? I'm going to hand it down. Just play. That's enough. You know, I have been glad on Thursday. That's my day.
Several times when we showed that, people complained that you make them look just like anybody else. Yeah, they are like anybody else.
In fact, they were, as a rule, much better than a lot of people in general population. They were just poor.
What Diane means by that is many of them had far slimmer criminal records than many. That prison Ellis was the maxi joint. People had been in a lot of times. A lot of these guys, it was their first time in or their second time in.
And many of them, if they had a good lawyer, they would have gotten off.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is this the end?
Yeah.
Should we talk about Brandon first?
Yeah.
Hang on just real quick. So Bruce, we had a little sound issue and I Googled the solution for it. So I'm going to give you a little instruction for the next one. According to the internet, when you click on the green share screen icon, you will see a pop-up window where you select your desktop or application, which you already did. Click the box in the lower left that says share computer sound. So let's just get as far up as you sharing your screen and let's see if we can locate that, that option. And so what we're getting is we're hearing the sound echoing back through your computer. Yeah.
No, I'm not seeing it here.
Let's see. The lower left, share computer sound. I'm not seeing it either. If anybody else on this call is a Zoom expert, feel free to unmute yourself and give us whatever advice you have.
I don't know if I'm a Zoom expert. Just repeat the question of what you're trying to do here.
There's a way to not hear through his speaker, but actually share the computer sound. So it's not, right now we're getting a sort of loop of his sound playing out of his computer and in through the speaker.
Okay. Are you, I know how to do that, but the times that I've done that, I've used an external microphone. And I'm assuming we're not doing that here.
I think I know the solution.
Okay.
So Bruce, what I would do is I would end the share screen real quick, just so we see your face and we don't see your screen. So if you
patience because they go home at night. They see their kid.
I'm trying. Oh, here we go.
Somebody doing 5-year sentence or 10 years or even a life sentence in Texas. They know that the man is going to come
Okay,
home.
can you see me now?
Yeah, you can. So you're not sharing your screen. So now go to the share screen button, and when you click on it, in the bottom left, you'll see share computer sound. And click on that before you click share.
In the far left corner.
All I see in the far left corner is the mute and stop video.
You need to be in the share screen where you choose which thing you want to share.
Okay.
So click on that first, yep.
And then
I got it. Done.
Y'all are fantastic. Thank y'all
Thank
so
you.
much. Yeah.
Now, shall we talk about him first?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Hold on. We're going to stop now because we want to talk for a moment. If I can get back. How do I get back? There we are. Whoops. Okay. Okay. Can you hear us now? Okay, done.
Can you hear us? Okay. The guy who closes this, Bruce spoke about this last week, is a guy named Brandon. And he's the only one Bruce talked about not going into his cell, that he was afraid of him because he had shot a glass and almost blinded somebody. And he was a very big guy, and everybody thought he was dangerous. Well, he does this rant at the end of the film, which Bruce always says, I think it's poetry, and he thought it was crazy, and it was probably both. But it is so, I think, so brilliant, and it has a wonderful end, understanding the real language that is being spoken. He's talking about, it's 1979, and he's talking about Iran, and as we've shown it over the years in many different places, it's always Iran. Something's always going on. Yeah, ethnic purity. He's just amazing. So when we showed the film on death row, I said, I want to thank Brandon. And the guards told us that they had given him a whole lot of medication because they wanted to calm him down. And they didn't want us to go there, but I said, I want to thank him, and I think he makes the film for me. So we go up to his cell, and we're standing there, and they had a couple of guards on me, and Bruce is next to me, and Bruce is nervous because he thinks he's unstable. And Brandon says, what did he say? He said,
he says, so you're Diane. He'd never met Diane.
Yeah,
before.
I didn't interview him.
He said, you're one beautiful mama. I want to shake your hand. And Diane says, okay. And so he puts his hand out.
And I put my hand in. And I knew that I probably shouldn't, and that he could pull off my arm. and Bruce goes white, and the guard doesn't know what to do. And Brandon is absolutely appreciating the scene.
Now Diane's arm is this far into the cell.
Into the cell, right. And he puts his other hand over, and so he's holding my hand with both of his hands and enjoying the fact that he's scaring to death everybody over here. And he's really, but I kept saying nice things to him, and the truth was, you know, we had read all their jackets. He was the smartest guy on death row. He had the highest IQ. And he had killed somebody right in a fight, in a bar fight.
He was fighting with a guy in a bar, and a cop tried to break it up.
Yeah.
And he killed the cop. I mean, it's one of those things, he had no intention of killing a cop, but it was Texas. He was black. A white cop was dead.
Right.
Goodbye, Brandon.
Right.
So, so Diane does this. And Brandon's smiling. He knows exactly what everybody's thinking. He's a very, very smart guy. And so he releases Diane's hand, and he says, now, my man Bruce, I want to shake your hand.
Which he did.
So Brandon used to have arguments every night with two people who lived in the pipe chase, this tunnel between the two sides of the cell block. George and a woman. He would fight with them all night long. And on death row is a behavioral sink, because cell doors are closing all the time, toilets are flushing all the time, people are yelling all the time, the TV sets are going all the time, the radios are going all the time. So guys really cherish the nighttime hours of quiet. And so with Brandon yelling, a lot of people were often mad at Brandon, and he would get beat up occasionally in the rec room. And one time he asked me for a cigar, and I said, I'll give you a cigar if you promise you won't argue with George and Emily tonight. He said, Bruce, on my word, I will not argue with George and Emily. I gave him a cigar. Next morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock, I come on the row. About 4 guys, Bruce yell at me, Bruce, he argued with, I go to Brandon's cell. He says, Bruce, that cigar you gave me didn't work. Give me another one and let's try it again. So that was Brandon. So this ending of the film, when we did it, I liked it because I thought, what goes on in death row is, it's a crazy place, and everybody's, you're in a pendency waiting to be killed, and you're trying to maintain some semblance of ordinary life. The tension of that is incredible. We bailed out several days before our money ran out for the trip. We just emotionally couldn't handle it anymore. And so these guys are living in that all the time. And for me, Brandon's looniness expressed the looniness of that place. Diane said, no, what's great about him is the poetry of what he says. Now, I think we were both right.
Right.
But the amazing thing, as Diane said, is this film was made in 1979.
Right.
And when we show it, people get to the end and they say it's absolutely current. So I have to call it up again because I closed it.
Right.
Yeah, and just remember to do that speaker share thing.
They have, courts have plenty of patience because they go home at night, they see their kids. Somebody.
Did you do it up there?
Yeah. I did it. See where are we? I did it. Okay.
Doing 5-year sentence, or 10 years, or even a life sentence in Texas, they know that the man is going to come home. He has a chance of making parole, but they have no idea for the death penalty. We might be executed. They start executing it, they could just snowball, and everybody would go faster and faster. But we don't know. Maybe they won't, maybe they will. The execution could start next month, or they could start next year, or they just won't start at all. But we have no idea of knowing. And just waiting and day after day, seeing the pain it puts your people through to have to see you wait. I can wait. I think I can wait here for 10 years and be all right, but the pain it's putting my people through makes me want to do something about it, and there's nothing I can do. Just sit here and wait.
It's once you come here, you lose everything. That's my opinion of it.
It's in every man's mind. We know that we're going to get out of here one way or the other. Either we're going to walk away free, we're going to walk away into population to serve a life term or some sort of time, or we're going to leave here feet first in a box.
All of it hard to me, it's just all hard. Nothing. Just being away from life is hard.
This place here is a nightmare, and you don't never wake up. You keep hoping you'll wake up, but you don't.
I'd like to just comment on the present day situation in the world as far as what's happening in Asia. Iran to be exact. I believe that any time that the real issue of religion, real politics come into being, it has to be one based on separation and understanding just what it means to go by the book or the Quran, the Holy Quran. For this book is inscribed so that man can get some kind of insight as to the existence of being religious. As far as the conditions and the situation, I'm not going to philosophize because it's not my belief. But I will contend that whatever's happening in Iran, we are so concerned about it, and it's vital that we somehow or another have some impetus into the total outcome. It's already obvious and already understood. The people of America, the United States government of America, is one based on the creed of ethnic purity. We run into contradictions and disagreements, but this all due to our form of politics. But when it comes down to spreading love and joy all over the world, I just like to say happy, and we happy that you all can come to understand that our own way of doing things, and it would be in conflict with you if you're not welcome. But we would like to express concern to the whole wide world, people in China, Red China, the people that's in Taiwan, Thailand, Philippines, Singapore, Australia, Russia, Europe, Finland, Denmark, Britain, Great Britain, France, Russia, Cuba, Africa, South Africa, West Africa, or wherever there's potential of insecurities and violations of human rights, we are concerned because it is our somewhat background to have something to say as far as the outcome in case of injustice based on one of the attempt to correct an old institutionalized concept and idea based on one of separatism. If you understand the real language that is being spoken.
So that's the end of death row.
Yeah.
That, you know, two things I want to say, and then I'll stop saying. But Bruce, I couldn't help but listening to that think of how, I mean, you kept the camera rolling, or somebody, I assume you're shooting that, and you keep it rolling, but you had done all that work with Black oral poetry prior to that, with toasts, so the preparation, I mean, I just want to sort of say to everybody that to recognize that in the moment as special, even if you don't know why it's special,
right,
only comes from having your term being there, having been other places at other times, and having that kind of well of recognition that something is happening here, and that and then the other thing, which, because you tell the story so much, you obviously recognize, is for one of you to say it's crazy, the other to say it's poetry, is maybe the best definition of collaboration that we could come to. You know, that to have co-equal interpretations that are different but coexist, isn't that sort of collaboration? That's not a question. That's just more of a
very smart. Yeah,
and that happens to us a lot. I mean, I forget who asked this before about our different backgrounds. You know, I grew up, as I said, atheist Jewish family in Brooklyn, street kid, Diane, born in Brooklyn, but grows up in a Catholic family in Rochester. But we were both readers our whole lives. Yeah. And so when we come at something, we don't come at it the same way.
Right.
We find a lot of the same things interesting, but we don't always find the same things in them of similar interest. And that plays out in our work, I think, constantly. So now we don't have much time.
No, so maybe we should skip the, really, what do you think?
We have this 4 or 5 minute thing from the end of Out of Order, and the Creeley thing, which is 15 minutes, which might be too long for our frame. Susan, what would you like to do?
You know, I feel like we have you here. It's so gracious of you to be here and so generous of you to be sharing. I think I would just encourage folks, if you have really important questions that you want to ask and we haven't taken the break yet, feel free to type them into the chat window and we can share them with Bruce and Diane, and if there's something they want to share back. Otherwise, if you need to jump off the call, we'll just thank you right now for having been here. And I think y'all just move forward until y'all are tired. So we're here.
Okay, well, somebody typed a note I saw a few minutes ago that Texas had moved its death row from Ella.
Yes.
Which is true, and it's important.
Yes, and the worst.
They moved it to another prison where you saw these guys are in basically an ordinary cell block. They're just one man in the cell. They would get out 3 times a week for 90 minutes into that recreation room you saw. If the weather was good, they got out into a small outdoor courtyard, very small. Now they're all in one-man cells with doors that are almost entirely solid, save for a slit through which their food trays are passed and the empty food trays are taken out when they are coming out like for a court hearing or to see a lawyer, which is rare. They put their hands through the slit, they turn around, kneel, put their hands back through the slit, they're handcuffed, then the door is open and ankle chains are put on them and they're led to wherever they are. We thought that death row was horrible.
Oh, it's
the current conditions. The next to last guy who spoke in this, the man who said, it's a nightmare but you never wake up. His name is Kerry Max Cook. Kerry is one of the 5 or 6 people in the play The Exonerated, and it was a play and a movie. He did over 20 years on death row, both the one you saw and in this far more horrible place where it is now, and was eventually cleared. On a technicality, Texas has figured out a way not to give him any compensation. He went in when he was about 20 years old, got out when he was in his early 40s. The whole portion of his life was just gone. You don't get it back. So when a lot of people say they're innocent, or they say, yeah, I'm guilty, but I'm not that guilty, I shouldn't have gotten the death penalty. And turns out sometimes it's true. Mm-hmm. And that's something to keep in mind. And so we would hear, we're in communication with Kerry now. We hear from him regularly. So. What is that question? I can't read that question.
It says, I would love to hear any advice or insights that you might have to offer a younger married couple navigating their relationship as both artistic collaborators and individual artists.
Get lucky.
Yeah, there's one of the wives of one of the Beatles. They said to her, "What's the secret to a long marriage?" And she said, "Stay married." It's
there have been bumps. I mean,
definitely, and there always are, and there's always ego, and there's always
Yeah, I mean, we are both high ego people. Yeah, so we are very competitive with each other. By the way, we are always, who's going to get the best gag, who's going to get it right. I mean, it's always.
Well, I wouldn't admit it.
I would.
But
that's another difference.
It's another difference. But to be serious for a second, keep your eyes on the prize, I would say. I mean, keep always thinking about what the marriage counselors say. Now, when you're having troubles, what you should do is think about why you got together and how it was in the beginning and all the rest of that. I don't know that kind of backward necessarily works, but if it instills patience and if it makes you feel quell your angers or irritations or all the rest of it, it's useful. And there's another thing to say about it too, which is that there's a lot of resistance to married couples. I mean, a lot of it in our case fell on me. Like they wouldn't believe that I had done anything on the films. And Bruce said, well, how do you think we did the Nun film? And they said, well, basically, what did she do? And Bruce said, well, read the credits, idiots.
Yeah, read the fucking book.
And
when Diane came up, no, we're serious. Over the years at the university, we've had incredible marriage approaches.
Yeah.
In the years when there was merit money, we never got a merit increase in the same year. When we did things together, normally he would get it and I wouldn't, and there would be no argument about that. When I said to our chair once, if I was a man, this wouldn't come up. You wouldn't say this. You wouldn't say, well, you got it because he got it. So there's a resistance. And I said once to somebody, to one of our chairs, I said, I used to think that some of the resentment or resistance that I got was sexual jealousy. I said, and now I just think it's money. And he said, Diane, there are those 2 checks. And I said, but Norman, it isn't as though I don't teach more than all the old fuckers in this department. And he said, but there are those 2 checks. So it's not all, people are not always helping you. Well, no, when Diane came up full professor at the meeting, I attended it until they threw me out. And at one point, the chairman said, somebody said something and said, you have to understand, we're not talking about a colleague here, we're talking about a wife. I reacted as you might expect I would, and that was when I was asked to leave the meeting.
Yeah.
So it's been great from our point of view, but there have been struggles at the university. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. We have a question from Eufus who wants to know, is there a subject or situation y'all have always wanted to cover or address, but have not yet?
Subject or a what?
A subject or a situation we've always wanted to address, but have not yet.
Well, probably not. When we did Death Row, I tried to talk Bruce into doing more interviews and something on sex criminals, because we had a lot of really good sex criminals, and it was just too heavy. So we never did that. Probably just as well.
No, but the thing is, we don't run out. I mean, we still got a whole bunch of projects going.
Yeah.
It's we're still cranking out books and doing stuff. So and things keep presenting themselves. Sometimes somebody says, "Would you guys be interested in taking a look at?" And we do. So, but I can't think of anything that. Most of the time, when we've gotten interested in something, we've gone there and done it. And we're both very curious people.
Right.
Who's the better cook?
Who's the better cook? Well, we're both good. I've done much more of it. And when Bruce puts his hand to it, like making bread or any other thing, he gets a lot more praise for it. But he has a natural gift too.
I have bread rising now that I will put in the oven when this is over.
And your dinner is in the hallway.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that anybody would be wondering is how did the 2 of you keep such energy? I mean, you don't have to do any more books. I'm stating the obvious. You don't have to do Zoom, at 7 o'clock at night.
I get to hang out with my old friend Tom Rankin.
Really?
Seriously, what does propel I mean, you share that clearly. So where does that, how do you all think about that? Not where does it come from? I mean, I don't, there's no way.
Oh, hormones. Or in Bruce's case, I used to think it was circumcision. I often thought that, I thought that was maybe the cue to Jewish genius, but it's probably hormones. It's luck. It's a kind of energy. I think it's a gift. I don't think you can necessarily get it if you don't have it. Do you?
I just worry if I stop, it'll catch up to me, whatever it is that's,
it's running after you.
Behind me. So we just, I just don't know how to not do something. It's just, I guess I get bored easily. So I keep doing things. The idea of not doing something to either is anathema to either of us. We're still teaching. I turned 84 last week.
And I turned 80 in December.
She taught 3 classes this semester. And we like it.
Yeah.
And we like this. We like hanging out with you guys. It's fun answering these questions. It's fun doing show and tell.
Bruce, and both of you, when you told about the problems about 2 checks, I wonder how in God's name you put up with university bullshit for all these years.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do. I couldn't wait to get out.
I know. Well, I think we have more fun in it than you did, Howie.
No, I had a lot of fun.
Did you?
Well, folks, the guy who's talking now is our old friend Howie Becker.
Very great man.
Very well-known sociologist. Who, did you just turn 94 or 93?
92.
You're an alta cocker, my alta cocker.
We're so grateful for you.
But Howie's still cranking out books too.
Right, yeah.
And when he's not, he feels depressed and writes me letters and says it's not going. And so
yeah. But he's asking specifically about the university, and part of it is that we have always had a life outside it.
Yeah.
And that we've always kind of.
It has not been our whole life.
I understand that.
And also
that life outside of it enough. It keeps you busy, for God's sake.
Well, yeah. But also for the last 25 years, I've had a very well-endowed chair.
Right.
That gives us a lot of discretionary money.
Yeah.
I can buy my cameras. I can fund students.
He doesn't have to kiss up to anybody.
I don't have to kiss anybody's ass anymore.
Right. You never did kiss anybody's ass much.
No.
No. I kissed a lot more.
That's a hard picture.
No, but Howie, part of it is that this university is one where I am as low contact in a university environment as you can possibly imagine. Don't tell any of them. I don't want them to find out. But I am, and so we can.
So you felt free, and we both did. There was such a terrific energy right from the beginning. You could do what you wanted to do. You could think what you wanted to think, and Bruce said at one point, I can't remember when, that as far as he was concerned, New York State was the Medicis, and I think that's a nice way to think of public institutions.
Well, not New York State. It was Rockefeller's University. Was the Medicis.
Right.
When we came here, there was just tons of money. The reason we got to be friends with Foucault is because he was hanging around here.
Yeah,
and we had dinner with him.
Yeah.
And so, for us, they were bringing us stuff on a platter that we just gobbled up for years.
Yeah.
So we really have managed to avoid a lot of the bullshit, Howie.
And I think part of it is also that we had each other. So, I mean, Bruce was always bitching and moaning and carrying on about the university and saying it was terrible. And he and Creeley used to say, yes, we got to get out of here. It's awful, da-da-da-dum. And then they would say, well, it's probably the same every other place. So, but we always had...
Well, I remember conversations in faculty meetings that were exactly about those 2 checks.
Really?
Somehow when I first got into the business, I mean, the idea of 2 checks going into the same bank account.
Heaven forfend.
Yeah.
And the chairman who said that to Diane, by the way, was himself a millionaire.
Yeah, he was so
He was
wealthy.
very wealthy.
His wife was very wealthy.
His wife was very wealthy. It was, we knew a guy named David Dortort. David was executive producer of the TV series Bonanza. And we met him at a conference on a Western film in Sun Valley in '76. We hung out with him for a while. And after, if those of you remember the series, one of the stars was a guy named Dan Blocker. And when Blocker died, the series folded, and either UCLA or USC had been after David for years to teach a course in film or television production. He never had time, but now he had nothing to do, so he did it. And he hated it. He said, Bruce, I went there because I wanted, this goes to your point, Howie. He said, I went there because I wanted to get away from the backstabbing and petty bickering of the film industry. He said, the backstabbing and petty bickering are exactly the same, but the stakes are so fucking puny.
Exactly. It's not worth fighting about.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to see the film. I think you have one more to show, right? The Out of Order.
We got a 6-minute clip from at the end of Out of Order.
Okay.
I'll show you that. Good.
That'd be great.
Okay. You want to set this up, Diane?
Well, it was funded by NEH, and part of the way that we pitched it was we said, this is a group of women who made an unusual choice, and then they made another unusual choice. They went into a convent, they came out of a convent, and it shows a certain amount about the socialization of women, and they don't blame men. This will tell us something about female desire and culture.
And what interested me about it was, it's one of the things that I've always been curious is how people wind up where they are. And these are women, I mean, most of us, for a lot of things in our life, we just look back and we realize we've gotten here. We never made a choice to get here, or whatever here we're talking about, but we are. The past always, of course, makes sense because it's ineluctable. It is what it is. But the choices were invisible at the time. These women have made a very specific choice to abstain from a certain part of the world's activities. They decided not to get laid. They decided not to have children. They decided not to have families, not to own property. They decided to submit themselves to the discipline of people who, in many cases, were far less intelligent, far less well-educated, and far less a whole lot of things than they were. And then at a certain point, they decided to reverse all those signs. So twice in their lives, they made conscious decisions of a kind the rest of us just realized later we have made. So again, this is another thing where we're both interested in the film and the subject, but we came out in different ways. So what you're going to see now is these are all women who had been in the same order Diane was in. And throughout the film, we're visiting them in their current lives, and they're talking about going in and getting out. This begins with a woman named Angela Fina, who was a potter. And it's filmed at Art Park, which is not far from here. And you'll see a little girl with short hair. That is our daughter, Rachel, who's now
50.
Now 50 with 2 lovely grandchildren and an attorney. And then you'll hear each of them making a short statement about what it is. And we're going to let it run into the credits because several of them said while we were making the film, one of the parts they loved most was the music.
Yeah.
And Diane will tell you about what the song being sung is when we get to it.
Now you're going to choose the sound.
Yeah, I got it already.
Okay.
Sort of, it isn't exactly obedience, but I have an absolute necessity of work that allows me almost no freedom. You know, I don't have the, I can't be very self-indulgent. You know, I work 50 or 60 hours a week with real hard physical work. And so I'm working harder, or as hard as I did in the convent, and I'm certainly living in poverty, in a sense. I'm living in more real poverty than I was in the convent, in that, I mean, I don't know if 3 months from now I'm going to have enough money to keep the house.
We have a little girl, Jamie White, and she'd like to find her mother. She'll be at the information booth.
And I'm having to be extremely frugal with the money that I have. And, you know, no cushion, nothing behind me at all. No, literally no money in the bank. And, you know, no pension for when I get older or sick or something like that. And, I mean, I never was that poor in the convent.
I mean, you know, in the convent, there was no worry about finances. I never had in my whole life worried about finances. And my mother will tell you I went through money like you wouldn't believe. If I made $50 a week, I spent $50 a week. And I should have saved. Richard's very good about saving money. But, I don't know. It was a very secure life. This is a real challenge. Of course, I love challenges, but it can get overburdening sometimes. We were a lot freer in a funny way in the convent.
What way?
Well, you didn't have to worry about food, clothing, and shelter, or a job. But, you know, you have to take risks when you make choices, and...
I would have married by the time I was probably 19 or 20. I probably would have had 5, 6 kids, because he wanted a lot of children than I did at that time. I would have been old, I would have been tired, and I probably would have had no extra education. I don't know, I just envision myself as being staid and old before my years if I hadn't had this.
Most of the women that I went to college with have kids 20 years old. I mean, they got right out and married, and, or 18, 19. I don't know if I could have handled that then. I don't know if I could have stood behind a sink and washed dishes, because I was a spoiled brat, and been happy. It wasn't hard. It was not hard to do that after, when I was older. But...
Well, you had to wash dishes in the convent, though.
Oh.
It isn't just the dishes.
No. But it was the tediousness. You did other things there, too. But just being a mother with 2 little kids in diapers when you're 20 years old or 21, I think I would have really felt tied down.
You would have been tied down.
And felt it worse.
There was a lot more developed in women in religious communities than there was in other places. We ran our own school system, we ran our own colleges, we ran our own hospitals, and we really did. We did all of those things that women in general in the culture did not do. Women did not run colleges and hospitals and school systems unless they were in a religious order. And so there was, in a sense, much more development of talent and opportunity than there would have been outside of religious orders. The system in the church was very highly developed, and it was an integrated whole. And it answered a lot of very difficult questions for people. And some people were in systems that did not answer the questions quite as well. And that's a less comfortable thing. I know that's one of the things that I had to deal with eventually, was dealing with uncertainty and not having all the answers, and not having a sense anymore of having all the answers to all of the great questions of life. And going from a belief set, which is one of, there is certitude, there actually is certitude, to one that says, well, actually there isn't certitude, is a very big change and a very big adjustment. I mean, it's just like living on land and then living on water. It's only more dramatic a change than that.
they are.
And if we wanted to see the whole film, do you know ways we could do that?
Yeah, it is distributed by DER in Boston, in Cambridge, or Boston, wherever they are. DER. Documentary Educational Resources.
Okay.
Variety gave us a terrific review, said it had legs.
There's Rachel Jackson. Did you see yourself in there, Rachel?
I did. Yes, I did. And it was so interesting hearing Angela's voice that I haven't heard in so many years.
Yes.
Brought back so many memories.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Bruce and Diane, can I ask you all a question?
Please.
Sure.
Just watching your two clips, I'm struck by something that I've thought about a bunch, which is I usually like to watch older films a lot more. And that's true of documentaries and narrative films. And I'm always trying to figure out why that is. And looking at your films, I mean, there are the obvious technical things. It's like everything used to be on film and on tripods, and you know, you use ingenue and Zeiss lenses, and everything looks nice, and there's a slower pace, and the editing is different. So that's part of it. But then there's this other part, just particularly thinking about the prison, folks in the prison, and just how full of personality and what good storytellers people used to be. I was shooting a film in South Louisiana a few years ago with a Native American community. And I remember talking to 3 different generations. There was a grandfather who was illiterate and was the sweetest, most amazing person I've ever met. And he was an amazing storyteller. And then there is his kids, and they were just like, they just seemed like me, even though we grew up in very different places, just kind of like normal, you know? And then there were their kids, and they were just like on their phones and watching stuff, and they had nothing to say. And just looking at your films makes me think, like, I just wonder if y'all have ideas about, like, what has changed in culture, and what did you capture back then that's not present today?
John, I wouldn't know where to go with that one.
Well, one place to go, I mean, the documentary filmmaker, John Cohen, said to us that if we lived in New York, the films would be faster. And we were always ticked at him for saying that. But in a way, it was probably true.
You know, remember I said before, we were figuring this out as we went. You know, we didn't have friends who were, when I was editing Death Row, John Cohen came by one time. And he's looking at me, and I got the film on one reel, and I got the sound on another. And I'm using the same tape for the film as I'm using for sound. And John says, you're supposed to use a different tape. And I said, there's a different tape? This is the level we were functioning at. So we approach this, our own personal approach is, we both like telling stories. We like listening to stories. We're good at eliciting stories because we listen. And so to answer your general question, I can't. All I can say is that from the point of view of our practice, what goes on in those films is what we've done in much of our work the rest of the time anyway. That is, I said this last week, if you listen to my audio interviews when I was doing those, you listen to a 30 or a 45-minute open reel tape, and you'll hear nothing from me except an occasional grunt or giggle. I mean, I just won't say anything. You know, I'll do facial expressions, but and if you want to go down a road that is totally irrelevant to what we're talking about, I'll let you go, because that's the only way I find out something I didn't know to ask a question about. And so I'm very patient. But what Tom was talking about before, about me listening, that's something I don't know if I learned to do it or if I was always doing it, but that is certainly part of the way I work and the way Diane's a great listener too. And that's a key part of doing the kind of work we do. You know, we don't do action films. The people we first observed making films did tripod stuff, so we picked it up from them. If I were making films now, I'd probably be doing them with this. But you know, you work with what's at hand with what you know. But now I have friends like you, John, and like Sarah, people who've made documentary films who could tell me stuff we didn't know it then. So
also the material dictates a lot.
yeah,
you know, you have to honor it.
I just realized it's getting dark here.
Yeah, it is.
Bruce, you know, one of the things you just said, the whole art of listening or the interest in listening, there's always stories. I mean, stories don't go away. I sometimes feel like, well, the good story, you know, we all feel like the last great storyteller, we just lost the light, or the last great blues man. But anytime we feel that way, we should remind ourselves that if we just shut up, the last great one is like right around the corner. And
yeah, go on to
that. You know, I mean, if you look at, I mean, that's not to oversimplify, but that's part of what being there and paying attention and observing and listening is, and that's what you all do.
Oh, yeah, you're right. For me, stories are the way we make life comprehensible. Otherwise is just a bunch of inchoate data. And the nature of the story of our past is continually realigning itself as we learn more, as other things happen. So a story that formulated itself one way 5 years ago or 10 years ago has a different ending now, or maybe a different beginning, maybe a different middle. So the material for what are ostensibly the same stories is continually in flux as we come to understand who and what and where we are. You know, being older now, you know, and with having a lot of our friends dead, puts us in a different perspective about certain aspects of narrative, about thinking about futures, about thinking about past. The COVID crisis, you know, I bet everybody watching this today, you had your life singularly disrupted in a way you could not possibly have imagined 5 months ago. And so these things, the story is always in flux. You know, I wrote a book called The Story is True. This is something I've been interested in for years.
I'd say the best story I've heard tonight is Diane's story in front of the sandwich machine.
Our foundation. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
There's some stories you don't need to hear, but you'll remember forever, and that's one. The Genesis story, right?
It's our origin story. It's true. Yeah, but it also, you know, a lot of what's kept us going, I think, in a lot of ways. I've mentioned some of our dear friends. I see Penelope Creeley is on with us now. Hello, Pen. Hi, Pen's up in Maine.
Yeah.
We were friends with Bob and Penn. We were friends with Bill and Margie Kunstler. So we've had a lot of couple relationships where both members of the couple have been really interesting people too. And that has fed into a lot of what we've done. Bob and Bill Kunstler were two of the great talkers of the Western world.
Right.
Bob could talk for hours, and I could listen to him talk for hours, and Kunstler the same. So in addition to all the books, Leslie, yeah. We're doing a book now about our late colleague, Leslie Feeder. Did I mention that last week?
I don't think so.
Leslie wrote some of the most important critical work about American literature. It was published in the 20th century. And Love and Death in the American Novel. What else? Anyway, he was one of the reasons I came to Buffalo. He was one of the people in this department when I was hired. This department had Leslie Fiedler, John Barth, Robert Creeley, Charles Olson. I mean, it was just a writer's paradise. You could not imagine a better place to have been. So Leslie, every time we'd eat dinner at Leslie's house, he would talk and talk and talk. So Leslie's getting old and not doing too well. And one time I sent him a note. I said, Leslie, you're going to die soon. And these stories are going to die with you. Why don't we record them? I don't know what got me to, maybe it was a single malt night or something. Yeah. So Leslie writes back and says, great idea, let's do it. So Diane and I did about 20 hours of filming, videotaping Leslie talking, which Leslie loved to do. And it was a long time ago, but other things got in the way. But we're making a book of that now too, Leslie, because Leslie knew everybody in American literary world in his period. So he's got a lot of great stories. And he was a translator. He was at Iwo Jima. He was a Japanese translator in World War II. Really interesting guy. So, anything else?
Yeah, does anyone else have other questions they want to throw out while we're here?
Well, my next door neighbors learned a lot more about us than we know. Barry.
And I understood there was a fascinating couple living next door. I've got a glimpse into how fascinating they are, how wonderful the last 2 weeks have been.
When this virus is gone, Barry, we will do this face to face.
Yeah, no, yeah, you'll have to come over for a martini, Bruce.
I accept.
Yeah, that brings me back to Marie had actually asked a question, which one of you makes the better martini on the back patio? Are you co-equal on that count?
No, I make the martinis and I never measure anything. We had a dear friend, Bud Johns, who's gone now, who loved martinis, who was one of those people who ritualized it incredibly, would measure everything, would shake it so many times. And we both enjoyed watching him do it. And fortunately, Bud never saw me do it because he would have, I was an utter villain or something. The thing is almost no vermouth, a lot of gin, or in her case, a lot of vodka. It's really quite simple. And then you find the olives.
I get the olives.
Diane gets the olives, yeah.
Well, I can vouch for sitting in Diane and Bruce's kitchen and having a martini. It answers many questions.
Some of those answers are even remembered the next day.
But you truly, in all seriousness, can feel the way in which the collaboration extends way beyond the work, throughout the day, through the night, and is both co-equal, but also just interwoven in a way that is extraordinary. And that's the question that somebody asked of how to make this happen. I mean, there's no recipe, but you can feel it there. When Bill Ferris and I stayed. We cleaned Bill off, and had a martini. It's just extraordinary to think of you all there, day after day, night after night. I get emails from Bruce Jackson that are time stamped, and I don't think he plays with his time on the computer. They're time stamped at 3:14 a.m. or 5:32 a.m. or whatever, and they're lengthy, publishable. Reflections on something.
One of the most important things that happened to me in my life, this is the absolute truth. I was a kid. I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn. It was, when I grew up there, it was Jewish and Italian. My father had literally been born on that street. But it was, we were a working class Jewish family. My mother in junior high school made me take typing. I was the only boy in this typing class, and I got ragged to shit about it on the street. I never heard the end of it. That is the single most important course I have ever taken in my entire life. The reason you get those emails is because I still type very fast. I do. The whole time I was in the Marine Corps, I had a typewriter in my seat bag.
Yeah.
To save you from the brig.
It once kept me out of the brig once.
Yeah.
I got into trouble, and the guy who
A lot
was
of people just heard you say Marine Corps, and it hadn't crossed their mind that you were in the Marine Corps until now.
He was very young.
but I'd been naughty, and they were going to deal with it, and it turned out the company clerk had just gotten transferred or gotten out or something, and they needed somebody who could type. And they literally said to me, Jackson, typing or the brig. So I typed. So I still have that typewriter, by the way. So the ability to do, Tom, the ability to use tools and not have to think about them.
Right.
For tools to be transparent is, John, you know this too. And Sarah, you know this. For the tool to be transparent, so it just goes from what you're doing to what you're getting. If you have to stop and think about doing it, you're going to trip on your shoelaces.
Right.
So is it martini time?
I might be. Anybody else have anything there? Burning question before we close? Somebody wants to know what model your typewriter is.
It's a Royal Portable.
You didn't show us a picture of you in Marine uniform.
I have to dig it out. They exist.
There's a great one that I've seen before somewhere, Bruce. You've shown of you as a Marine.
One in the truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in a communications company for a while. That was interesting. We operated the radio and radar for the Eastern Coastal Defense between Washington, D.C. and Florida. And our unit's job was to identify incoming aircraft. And if it was something that was not, I was in the 2nd Marine Air Wing at the end of my service. And if we could not identify an aircraft, we didn't, the officers, they sent up jets to intercept it. But the interesting part of it was all our communications went through a room in which people sat on banks of chairs, all with headphones. And in the front of the room was a huge lucite board. And on the board was a map, literally a line mapping the coastline. And as planes came into our area, now all of this is done electronically now. As planes came into our area, the color would change. If they were identified, if they were a commercial flight, it would be a certain color and nobody would pay attention. If it were not identified, nobody knew. It got into a certain ring, its color would change. If it gets to another ring, its color would change, and then the planes would scramble. And what has always stuck with me about it, and I think about it now when I see pictures of these military operations in Las Vegas, operating drones in the Middle East, it's a game. It was just like a board game. There was nothing real or substantial about it. Where we were in that room, it was soundproof. You couldn't hear the planes taking off. They were a quarter mile away. It was a board game. And so so much of this nowadays, I think that is still part of it. So I don't know why I got onto that, but it's part of the impersonality of what I see in war so much. It was my first movie, I guess. And of course, when we saw Dr. Strangelove, You have a board like that in Strangelove. It's a more technical board. It's electronic. We literally had guys with crayons, the kind of crayon that there was lights at the bottom and the sides, so the crayon would appear to be in day glow. Kids' toys, people die.
This has been great.
Good seeing you all.
Wonderful
Yeah.
evening.
I'm interested. Hi, I'm interested to see how the film series develops after this hiatus and the change from an unrecorded format, a live format, to one in which you'll be prepping a portion of it ahead of time, and I'm not quite sure what will happen after that, and I'm not sure if you're quite sure what will happen after that.
What we're thinking of doing now, we know it's going to be asynchronous in the fall. It's very unlikely the university will be open. And so we're probably going to do films that are in the Criterion catalog. So, because anybody will be able, we know people will be able to get them. We'll prepare our video introductions. We'll prepare the equivalent of the handout as we have for the last 20 years, but they'll go out a week early. So people will have time to do it. And then in our regular screening time on Tuesdays, we're thinking of doing what we're doing right here, is just having a Zoom schmooze with whoever wants it, with the students in the class and whoever wants to join us talking about the film, just as we did in the theater. Bob Mampey has been a long and loyal member of the...
Mostly loyal.
You've done a good,
loyal.
You've done a good
Wonderful,
job.
wonderful suggester
Yes,
also.
yes.
Oh, it's been a great experience, and I really look forward to seeing it someday return to a similar way it was conducted. It was a great format. It is a great format.
Yeah, we too.
But here we are.
Oh my gosh, thank y'all so much. And I know because you were a co-host, Bruce, and you are recording from your side, all the files will come to you, and you'll have a chance to also see the chats where everybody has thanked you and said goodnight. And so you might want to take a look through the chat history.
I do. Thank you, everybody. It's been it's great for us. We spend most of our time talking to each other, and there are several of you we've been in, a lot of you we've been in email contact with and regularly or intermittently, and it's one guy, Barry, I talked to through the bushes between our houses, and it's been nice to see you all. Rachel Cohen, who's the woman in the white hair who's waving, her father was dear friend Ira Cohen, a psychologist at UB, who played in a jazz band with the novelist John Barth that I mentioned, who had been here when I first came here. A very interesting group that used to do it up every week in your house as you were growing up.
Jack Clark and
Jack Clark.
Charlie Kyle.
Yeah.
And I think every university had a faculty band like that.
Right.
Yeah. So we are going to reward ourselves in our usual way. Oh, and I have bread I have to put in the oven. So.
That's true.
So,
have an extra martini on me, Bruce.
I shall, buddy.
Good night.
Wash it.
Good night. It was a pleasure.
Night.
Is Eric? Oh, Eric. Eric, are you there? Hi.
There he is.
Hello.
This is Eric Barriman is one of our children. How are you, Eric?
I've been at the beach. That's why I'm so dark. Children.
It is good to see you, Junior.
I turned off my camera because I had to make some food real quick, and nobody wants to see that.
Eric is the dramaturge and star of the B-side, the Worcester Group play. that we mentioned last week that was based on some work I did in 1964. And we are meeting this Sunday to work on the next one.
Yes,
which
yeah.
is going to be perhaps the filthiest thing the Worcester Group has ever done.
That a lot of people have probably done or seen. Yeah. Yeah. And what's fascinating is that this stuff is older than me. So it's not like I'm inventing something new. It seems that people were dirty for a very long time. Humanity's been dirty for a very long time.
The thing is, I mentioned this last week. Forgive me, those of you who heard it last time. I started talking about work I'd done in 1964 in the prison, and Eric and the Worcester Group have brought that work into the immediate present. I mean, the Worcester Group is the most honored avant-garde theater company in New York. They did this play, we're doing this. And Tom, you asked what keeps me turned on and stuff like this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard not to stay lit up with gigs like this coming down the road.
I love listening to you both as always. I miss you both dearly. And I love seeing photos that, I mean, I feel like you guys have millions of photos because I've seen so many photos that aren't published and things. And I saw probably 90% of the photos I haven't seen. And I was like, I haven't seen those. I've seen a lot of photos, but you know. So I also support the book of Diane's photos from the women's prison. I also support that as well.
All right.
And hope to see that.
Noted. Noted.
So.
Wow. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Stay well.
Hi, Eric.
Bye.
That's Rachel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, stop.